My sister told me to blend in like I was a family embarrassment. Then she introduced me as unemployed in front of her fiancé's elite coworkers. I just smiled because I already knew exactly what Monday morning would look like. When he walked into the boardroom and saw who was sitting at the head of the table, his face did not just drop, his whole future did. And just like that, my sister's perfect life started collapsing in real time. My name is Zoe Jenkins, and I am 34 years old, to the rest of the world, specifically the sector of the Pacific Northwest that deals in venture capital and enterprise software. That name commands a certain level of immediate spine-stiffening respect. But to the woman currently screaming into my ear through my phone receiver, I am nothing more than a liability she has to manage. "Just do not make me look stupid, Zoe," Brielle hissed. Her voice was sharp enough to slice through the static. "That is all I am asking." "Is that really so hard?" I held the phone away from my ear, staring out through the floor-to-ceiling glass of my living room. Below me, the Seattle skyline was waking up, a grid of steel and gray light struggling against the overcast morning from the 42nd floor. The city looked like a circuit board, organized and predictable, unlike my sister. "I am listening, Brielle," I said, my voice flat. "I will be on my best behavior." "I am serious," she snapped, not satisfied with my capitulation. "Graham is bringing 2 of the senior VPs from the office tonight. These are serious people. Zoe, they manage budgets bigger than the GDP of small countries. They do not want to hear about your little, whatever it is you are doing these days, that coding thing, the startup phase. Just do not bring it up." I took a sip of my coffee. It had gone cold 20 minutes ago, but I drank it anyway, letting the bitterness sit on my tongue. "My little coding thing," I repeated. "Yes, exactly. Look, I know you're trying to find yourself or whatever, and that is fine," she said, her tone shifting from aggression to that pitying, saccharine sweetness that I hated even more. "But Graham is under a lot of pressure. There is a massive restructuring happening at the company next week, and he needs to look like he has his life together. That includes his future family. So if they ask what you do, just say you are taking a sabbatical, or that you are consulting. Just keep it vague. Do not start rambling about disruption or algorithms. You confuse people, and it makes it awkward." I walked over to the kitchen island, my bare feet silent on the heated, polished concrete. My laptop was open, the screen glowing with a stream of urgent notifications. The subject line at the top of my inbox read, "Urgent. Board meeting agenda. Monday morning. Chairwoman review required." Below that was a frantic email from my chief financial officer regarding a $300 million acquisition target we were vetting. "I will blend in, Brielle," I said. "I will be practically invisible." "Good," she exhaled, the tension leaving her voice. "Wear something nice, okay? Not that gray hoodie you live in. We are going to the Juniper Room, 7 o'clock sharp. Do not be late." The line went dead. She did not say goodbye. She never did when she felt she had won the point. I set the phone down on the marble counter next to a stack of term sheets I had been reviewing since 4 in the morning. It was funny, in a dark, twisted sort of way. My family had constructed an entire mythology around me in the Jenkins family canon. Brielle was the success story. She was the one who married well, the one who knew how to host a dinner party, the one who understood the social hierarchy. I was the driftless younger sister, the one who stared at screens too much, the one who could not hold down a normal 9-to-5 job because I was too headstrong or too disorganized. They saw my silence as failure. They interpreted my privacy as shame. I looked back at my laptop. I had 3 hours before I had to start getting ready for this dinner. 3 hours to review the strategic roadmap for Vanta North Systems, the company I had founded 7 years ago in a sublet basement in South Lake Union. The company that now employed 1,200 people across 3 continents. The company where Graham Sutter, my sister's fiancé, had just been promoted to a mid-level management position in the product division. He worked for me. He just did not know it yet. It was not entirely his fault. I operated in the shadows by design. My name was on the legal documents, but I rarely did press. I hated the spotlight. I preferred the engine room. When I did attend meetings, I was usually introduced simply as Zoe, a consultant or an advisor. While my heavy hitters did the talking, I liked watching people when they thought the most powerful person in the room was the man in the loudest suit. You learned a lot about character that way, but lately, the anonymity had started to chafe, not because I wanted the fame, but because the disrespect for my own blood was becoming suffocating. I remembered last Thanksgiving, I had tried, really tried, to explain to my father that we had just closed a Series C funding round that valued my company at over $1 billion. "Dad," I had said, passing the gravy, "we hit a milestone this week. The company is officially a unicorn." He had frowned, looking at the television where a football game was blaring. "That is nice, honey, but unicorns are fantasy. You need something real. Brielle says Graham is on track to make $200,000 a year by the time he is 30. That is real money. Maybe you should ask Graham if his company is hiring support staff. You are good with computers. IT support is a solid career." I had shut my mouth then. I had shut it tight. And now, here I was, 34 years old, chairwoman of the board, owner of the penthouse I was standing in, which I bought through a trust so my family would not see the address and ask questions I did not have the energy to answer. I sat down at the island and pulled the laptop closer. The screen was dense with data, revenue projections, churn rates, and a personnel file that had been flagged for review. Graham Sutter, senior product lead. I clicked on his file. His performance reviews were decent, but his peer feedback was mixed. "Arrogant," one note said. "Tends to take credit for team efforts," said another. I closed the laptop with a snap. They wanted me to be the embarrassment. They needed me to be the embarrassment. It validated their worldview. If I was the failure, then Brielle's safe. Predictable choices were the victory. If I was successful, wildly, incomprehensibly successful, then it meant their entire metric for a good life was flawed. I walked to the bedroom and opened my closet. It was not filled with the hoodies Brielle imagined. It was filled with bespoke tailoring, structured blazers, and silk that cost more than Brielle's wedding dress. I ran my hand over a black blazer. It was sharp, severe, and commanded authority. I pulled it out. Tonight, I would not wear this. Tonight, I would wear something soft, something forgettable. I would play the role of the unemployed little sister one last time. I would go to the juniper room. I would sit there and let Graham Sutter explain the world of technology to me. I would let him explain my world to me. I wanted to see exactly who he was when he thought no one of consequence was watching. I checked the time. 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I had time for a run. I needed to clear my head. The anger was there, simmering in my gut like acid. But I could not let it show. Not yet. Discipline was what got me here. Discipline was what built Vanta North. And discipline was what I would need to get through 3 courses of condescension without throwing a wineglass at my future brother-in-law. I walked back to the window. The city looked different now. The gray clouds were breaking, letting shafts of cold sunlight hit the glass towers. Somewhere in one of those towers, Graham Sutter was probably adjusting his tie, checking his talking points, and terrified about his Monday morning meeting with the mysterious chairperson of the board. He had no idea that the terrifying figure he was prepping for was the same woman he was going to ignore over appetizers tonight. "Tonight, they want me to disappear," I said aloud to the empty, expensive air of my apartment. "Fine, but Monday morning, I won't." The Juniper Room was the kind of establishment that charged $20 for a cocktail simply because they used ice cubes carved by hand from a glacier that was probably melting due to the very industries the patrons here invested in. It was a cavern of dark velvet, brushed brass, and lighting so low it felt less like a dining room and more like a conspiracy. It was the preferred habitat for Seattle's elite, a mix of old timber money that smelled like mahogany and new tech money that smelled like anxiety and expensive cologne. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat at the table Brielle had reserved. a semicircular booth near the back that offered a panoramic view of the room. I was wearing black pleated trousers and a cream silk blouse that had cost me more than my first car, though it lacked any visible logos. To the untrained eye, I looked like an assistant. To the trained eye, I looked like the person who signed the assistant's checks. Brielle arrived 3 minutes late, looking like a storm cloud wrapped in designer chiffon. She did not say hello. She dropped her purse on the leather seat and performed a visual autopsy of my appearance. "Is that what you decided on?" she asked, her eyes lingering on my collar. "It is a bit severe. Zoe, I told you this was a casual business dinner, not a funeral." "It is clean," I said, unfolding my napkin, "and I am comfortable." "Comfortable," Brielle repeated the word like it was a diagnosis of a terminal illness. "Well, try to look a little less stiff when they get here. Graham needs everyone to be relaxed. He is on edge." She signaled for a waiter without looking at him and ordered a bottle of sparkling water. Then she turned the full force of her attention back to me. "So," she said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "how is the hunt going? Any leads?" I took a sip of tap water. "I have had a few interesting conversations." "Right, conversations." She sighed, a long, tragic exhalation. "Look, Zoe, Graham thinks he might be able to get you an interview with the office management team. It is mostly scheduling and answering phones, but the benefits are incredible. They have a dental plan that covers everything. I am okay for now." "Brielle, really? You are 34, she snapped, then caught herself and lowered her voice again. "You are 34, and you are drifting. I just want you to be safe. When they ask tonight, just let me handle it. We will say you are taking a gap year, or finding yourself. Just do not make it sound like you failed at that little app thing you tried to build." I did not have the heart, or perhaps the energy, to correct her. The little app thing was currently processing 40,000 transactions per second globally. "Here they come," Brielle hissed, straightening her spine and pasting a smile onto her face that looked painful. "Smile, Zoe, please." Graham approached the table flanked by 2 other men. They moved as a unit, a phalanx of tailored navy suits and open-collared shirts. Graham looked tired, the skin under his eyes dark, but he carried himself with the manic energy of a man trying to convince the world he was essential. "Ladies," Graham announced, sliding into the booth next to Brielle and pecking her on the cheek. "Sorry for the delay. The Q3 retrospective ran long. Absolute nightmare. Logistics is bleeding out on the server side." "It sounds so intense," Brielle cooed, squeezing his hand. Graham gestured to his companions. "Zoe, this is Marcus, our VP of Operations, and Jason, who heads up the integration team. Guys, this is Brielle's sister, Zoe." "Nice to meet you," Marcus said, giving me a nod that was polite but dismissive. He did not ask what I did. He clearly assumed that if I was important, he would already know who I was. "Zoe is currently between roles," Brielle interjected quickly, before I could even open my mouth. "She is taking some time to pivot. She tried the startup world for a bit, but you know how that is. It is so unstable." "Brutal space," Jason said, picking up the wine list. "Everyone thinks they are going to be the next unicorn. 90% of them crash and burn within 18 months. It is cute that people keep trying. Though," "Right," Graham laughed, a hollow, barking sound. "It is like playing house. Real enterprise scale? That is where the adults play. We are dealing with infrastructure that supports millions of users. You cannot hack that together in a garage." I sat quietly, listening to them dismantle my industry. They spoke in a dense code of acronyms: KP is, OKRs, ROI, throwing the terms around like weapons to prove who was the smartest person in the room. They ordered expensive wine without looking at the price. They complained about the overhead of managing junior developers. I waited for a lull in the conversation, a small gap in their wall of noise. "I was reading about the new latency protocols for cloud-based enterprise systems," I said, keeping my voice light, almost inquisitive. Do you think the shift to edge computing is going to impact your current roadmap, specifically regarding data sovereignty in the European markets? The table went silent. Jason, the integration lead, paused with his wine glass halfway to his mouth. He blinked, looking at me for the first time with actual focus. That is actually a huge issue for us right now, Jason said slowly. We are having trouble reconciling the GDPR compliance with the new latency targets. How do you know about edge computing architecture? I saw a flash of panic in Brielle's eyes. This was not the script. I was supposed to be the charity case, not a peer. I read a lot, I said simply. But surely if you decentralize the data processing, you reduce the load on the core servers, which would solve your bottleneck issue. Would it not? Jason leaned forward, engaged now. Theoretically, yes, but the cost of implementation is astronomical unless you have a proprietary framework. We were discussing exactly that in the meeting today. Well, I started. If you look at how Vantanorth Systems handled their scaling issue last year, Zoe reads all sorts of blogs, Brielle cut in, her voice loud and shrill. She laughed, a brittle sound that shattered the moment. She has a lot of free time on her hands right now. But Graham, tell them about the retreat. Graham has been selected for the leadership retreat in Aspen. Jason leaned back, the interest fading from his eyes as the social hierarchy reasserted itself. The brief window where I was a person had closed. I was back to being the unemployed sister who read blogs. Graham puffed up, grateful for the save. Yeah, it is a big deal. Only the top 5% of management gets invited. It is where the real decisions get made. He is so modest, Brielle beamed, looking around the table to ensure everyone understood her fiancé's value. He practically runs that division. Just then, Graham's phone buzzed on the table. It was a sharp, aggressive vibration against the wood. He glanced at the screen, and the color drained out of his face so fast I thought he was going to faint. He stared at the message, his mouth slightly open. "Everything okay, babe?" Brielle asked, her hand hovering over his arm. Graham swallowed hard. "It is a calendar update for Monday morning. And?" "It is the board meeting," Graham said, his voice tight. "The notification just updated the attendee list. The chair is coming." "The chair?" Marcus asked, looking up from his steak. "You mean the actual chairperson? I thought they were a ghost. No one has seen them in the building for 3 years." "They are coming," Graham said, wiping a bead of sweat from his upper lip. "And they are leading the session. It says, mandatory attendance, no proxies, strategic review." The mood at the table shifted instantly. The bravado evaporated, replaced by the primal fear of middle management facing the unknown wrath of the executive suite. "Who is it?" Jason asked. "Do we even know their name? I heard it was some recluse billionaire from Silicon Valley." "I have no idea," Graham whispered. "But if the chair is running the meeting, heads are going to roll. They do not come down from the mountain unless something is wrong. My numbers for the last quarter were creative. If they dig into the raw data, I am dead." Brielle looked at Graham, but she did not look worried. She looked ecstatic. To her, this fear was validation. It proved that Graham was in the high-stakes game. Only important people had problems this big. She reached out and squeezed his arm, her eyes shining. "You will be fine. Honey, you are the best at what you do. This is just another chance for you to shine." Then she turned to me. A look of triumphant pity plastered across her face. "See, Zoe," she said, gesturing to her terrified fiancé. "This is what a real career looks like. It is stressful. It is high pressure. It is not playing around on a laptop in your pajamas. When you have real responsibility. Monday mornings matter." I looked at Graham, who was currently chugging his wine like it was water. I looked at Brielle, who was glowing with the reflected glory of his anxiety. "I can see that," I said softly. "It looks very intense." I picked up my fork and took a bite of the $20 salad. It tasted like nothing. I watched them panic about a person who was sitting 3 feet away from them. I watched Graham check his phone again. terrified of the chair, while treating the actual chair like a piece of furniture. It was a farce. It was a tragedy. And it was the most entertaining dinner I had attended in years. Brielle thought she was showing me my place. She thought she was displaying the gap between us. She was right. Of course, there was a gap, but she had no idea that she was standing on the edge of a cliff, and I was the gravity that was about to pull the whole thing down. I am sure Monday will be educational for everyone, I added, taking a sip of water. Graham did not hear me. He was too busy typing a message to his team, likely telling them to bury the bodies before the sun came up on Monday. Brielle just patted my hand, a gesture so condescending it almost burned my skin. "Don't worry," she whispered. "One day you will understand." I smiled. "I am looking forward to it." The ride home was quiet. I sat in the back of the town car, watching the city blur past the tinted windows. The rain had started again, turning the streetlights into streaks of fractured gold on the wet pavement. We turned a corner onto 4th Avenue, and there it was, the Fiancé North Systems Tower. It was not the tallest building in Seattle, but it was distinct. It was a monolith of black glass and steel, rising 40 stories into the dark sky. A single, subtle line of white light traced the edge of the structure, and near the top, the logo glowed with a quiet, intimidating, pulsating rhythm. Brielle had spent 2 hours tonight talking about how Graham worked for a tech giant. She had used the phrase like an incantation, summoning prestige from the ether. She had no idea that the giant she was so proud to associate with was the woman sitting across from her, picking at a salad. They never asked me what I actually did. Not really. To my family. My career was a series of vague, dismissive sentences. It was always, "Zoe is doing her computer thing," or "Zoe is trying to get a project off the ground." They pictured me alone in a dark room, fixing printers or writing code for video games that no one played. It was easier for them to digest. The truth was heavier and far more complex. Fiancé North Systems did not start in a garage. That was a myth for movies. It started in a cramped, windowless office above a Thai restaurant in Belltown 9 years ago. I was 25, fueled by cheap espresso and a singular burning idea about how to revolutionize enterprise data architecture. I did not sleep for the first 18 months. I wrote the core kernel myself. I pitched to venture capitalists who looked at my age, my gender, and my quiet demeanor, and showed me the door, but I did not stop. When the first major contract came in, I hired 3 engineers. When the second came in, I hired 20. Now, 9 years later, Fiancé North was the backbone for 30% of the Fortune 500 companies. We processed transactions that moved economies. We secured data that governments relied on. And I was not just a founder who had been pushed aside for a professional CEO. I was the majority shareholder and the chair of the board. I held the kill switch. I had tried to tell them once. It was 5 years ago. I had just closed our Series B funding, which had brought $50 million into the company accounts. I was vibrating with adrenaline, proud in a way I rarely allowed myself to feel. I went to my parents' house for Sunday dinner, ready to share the news. "Dad," I had said, catching him in the kitchen, "I have some big news. My company just closed a major deal. We are going to expand to London." He had patted my shoulder, his eyes already drifting back to the newspaper on the table. "That is good, honey. London is expensive. Though, make sure you have enough savings. You know, Brielle just got promoted to senior coordinator at the marketing firm. She gets a parking spot now." I had frozen. The $50 million stuck in my throat. "It is not. I am not moving there. Dad, I am opening an office there. I am hiring people." Right, he had said, nodding absently. "Well, do not bite off more than you can chew. You always did have a big imagination. Just make sure you can pay your rent." He did not hear me. He did not want to hear me. In the architecture of our family, Brielle was the successful one because her success was understandable. It was tangible. Promotions, parking spots, titles that sounded familiar. My success was abstract, terrifyingly large, and therefore, it had to be minimized. It had to be reduced to tinkering so that the balance of the house remained undisturbed. Brielle needed me to be small. I realized that years ago, if I was the chaotic, struggling artist type, then her rigid, planned life looked like an achievement. If I was actually powerful, then her life just looked safe, and Brielle terrified of being ordinary. So, I let them have their story. I stopped correcting them. I became the driftless sister. It was a costume I wore to keep the peace, but tonight, the costume had started to feel like a straitjacket. The car pulled up to my building. The doorman, Henry, opened the door before I could touch the handle. "Good evening, Ms. Jenkins," he said, holding an umbrella over me. "Did the dinner go well?" "It was enlightening, Henry," I said. "Thank you." I took the private elevator up to the penthouse. The silence of the apartment was different from the silence in the car. It was the silence of control. I walked into my study and sat down at the heavy oak desk. I unlocked my secure terminal. The screen hummed to life, displaying the preparatory documents for Monday. Agenda Item 1. Strategic Review of Product Roadmap. Presenter. Graham Sutter. I stared at his name. The irony was that Graham and I had met before. It was 6 months ago. I liked to do pulse checks, where I would walk through different departments without an entourage, just to see the culture on the ground. I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, carrying a tablet. I had stepped into an elevator on the 12th floor. Graham had rushed in right before the doors closed. He was on a call, loud and performative, talking about crushing the quarterly targets. He had looked at me, scanned my casual clothes, saw no badge of authority, and dismissed me instantly. He did not nod. He did not say hello. He actually shifted his body to block me from the button panel, treating me like I was invisible space he was entitled to occupy. When the doors opened, he brushed past me, still talking, nearly knocking the tablet out of my hand. He saw a nobody. He saw an obstacle. He did not know he had just body-checked the woman who signed his paychecks. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly. That was Graham's fatal flaw. He, like my sister, only respected power when it was wearing a neon sign. He could not sense it. He lacked the instinct to recognize that the quietest person in the room is often the one holding the keys. I tapped the screen, opening the detailed financial report attached to Graham's presentation. I had flagged the anomaly yesterday, a smoothing of the data curve that looked too perfect to be organic. Now, looking at it with the context of his dinner conversation, I knew exactly what it was. It was vanity. He had manipulated the churn rate to make his retention numbers look better for the upcoming review. He was lying to the board. He was lying to me. He thought he was walking into a room of dusty old men who would nod at his buzzwords. He thought he could dazzle them with charisma and jargon. I closed the file. The phone on my desk buzzed. It was a text from Brielle. "Hope you got home okay. Don't worry about what the guys said. They are just intense. Maybe look into that admin job? I can send you the link." I stared at the message. The condescension was almost impressive in its purity. She really believed she was helping. She really believed she was the savior of the family, throwing a rope down to her drowning sister. I did not reply. I turned the phone off and placed it face down on the desk. There would be no more hiding, no more blending in, no more biting my tongue while they rewrote my reality. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city one last time. The Vanta North Tower was still glowing in the distance, a beacon in the rain. "They want a show," I whispered to the glass. I would give them one. Monday morning was 36 hours away. I had a company to run. I had a board to lead. And for the first time in my life, I was going to introduce my family to Zoe Jenkins. Not the sister, not the failure, not the charity case, the chairwoman. Sunday in the executive suite of Vanta North Systems was not a day of rest. It was the only time the air was still enough to hear the structural creaks of the empire I had built, while the rest of Seattle was at brunch, debating the merits of sourdough versus brioche. I was sitting at a conference table that cost more than my parents' house, dissecting the future of 3,000 employees. The light in the room was cold and clinical, filtered through the gray cloud cover that hugged the 42nd floor. I preferred it this way. Sunlight made people optimistic, and optimism was dangerous when you were deciding whether to acquire a competitor or crush them. The acquisition of Lyra Tech is messy, my chief executive officer, Marcus, said. He was pacing the length of the room, his voice echoing slightly against the glass. Their user base is loyal, but their burn rate is catastrophic. If we buy them, my recommendation is to strip the IP, migrate the clients to our platform, and dissolve the entity. We can cut their headcount by 80% within the first quarter. I stared at the projection on the screen. It was a sea of red numbers turning into black, but the human cost was buried in the margins. No, I said. My voice was quiet, but Marcus stopped pacing immediately. The numbers support it. Zoe, he argued, though his tone was cautious. It is the most efficient path to profitability. It is the most efficient path to a PR nightmare, I corrected. Lyra has talent we cannot replicate. Their engineering team solved the latency issue we have been stuck on for 6 months. If we fire them, they will go to Google or Amazon, and we will be back to square one. We buy them, but we keep the team. We integrate the culture, not just the code. I want a retention plan on my desk by Tuesday. Marcus looked at me, calculating. He knew better than to push when I used that tone. Understood. I will draft the retention structure. Good. Next item. The door opened, and Maren Blake, my executive assistant, walked in. Maren was 28, terrifyingly organized, and the only person in the building who knew exactly how much coffee I consumed to stay alive. She placed a fresh cup on the table and a single crisp sheet of paper. The final attendee list for the board meeting tomorrow morning, Maren said, her voice crisp. Everyone has confirmed. No proxies. I picked up the list. It was a roster of heavyweights, 2 former senators, a retired tech CEO from the 90s, and the representatives from our major venture capital partners, and then, at the bottom, under the section labeled Operational Leadership Presentation, Graham Sutter, Senior Product Lead. I ran my finger over the name. It felt strange to see it there, printed in the same font as the people who controlled billions of dollars. Graham sent over his slide deck 20 minutes ago, Maren noted, tapping her tablet. He flagged it as final. He also sent a note to the board secretary asking if there was a specific dress code for the presenter. Apparently, he is very nervous. He should be, I said. Did he ask who the chair is? He did. Maren allowed a small, professional smile to touch her lips. He asked if the chair was approachable. I told him that the chair values competence above personality. A perfect answer. Load his deck. The screen shifted. The acquisition numbers vanished, replaced by Graham's presentation. It was sleek. It was polished. It was designed to impress people who skimmed headlines and ignored footnotes. I leaned forward, my eyes scanning the data. Stop there, I said. Slide 7. Maren paused the scroll. It was a graph depicting user retention for the product line Graham managed. The line went up and to the right in a smooth, beautiful curve. It showed a 12% month-over-month growth with near zero churn. It was the kind of graph that got people promoted. It was the kind of graph that got bonuses approved. It was also impossible. I knew the market. I knew the seasonal dips. No enterprise software grew that consistently in the third quarter, especially not with the server instability we had experienced in November. Pull up the raw server logs for November, I instructed. Maren tapped a few keys. A second window opened, overlaying the pretty graph with the jagged, ugly reality of the actual usage data. There it was, in November. Usage had dropped by 8% due to the outage. In Graham's graph, November was a record-breaking month. He had not just smoothed the data, he had erased reality. He had filled the gap with projected numbers and presented them as historical fact. He is cooking the books, Marcus said, letting out a low whistle. It is not a lot, but it is enough to trigger a fraud audit if the SEC saw it. He thinks he is just polishing the apple, I said. studying the lie. He thinks because he is presenting to the board, he needs to look perfect. He assumes we do not look at the raw data. Do you want me to pull him from the agenda? Marin asked. I can tell him the slot was cancelled. No, I said, my eyes still fixed on the lie. Let him present. If he stands up there and lies to the board, I want to see if he has the courage to correct it when pressed, or if he doubles down. It will be a bloodbath, Marcus murmured. It will be a test, I corrected. Leave it. My personal phone buzzed on the table. It was the 10th time in the last hour. I glanced at the screen. Brielle, remember, wear something muted tomorrow. Maybe that navy dress? And for God's sake, if you talk to Graham's friends again, do not bring up computers. You sounded so weird at dinner. Brielle. Also, Graham is freaking out about tomorrow. Do not text him. He needs to focus. Brielle, are you even awake? Zoe? The messages were a rhythmic assault of anxiety and control. She was micromanaging a version of me that did not exist. She was coaching a ghost. I did not reply. I turned the phone over. I looked at the framed photo on the corner of my desk. It was the only personal item I kept in the office. It was taken 20 years ago, on a family trip to the Grand Canyon. In the photo, Brielle was standing in the center, arms wide, a bright, demanding smile on her face, soaking up the sunlight. I was standing behind her, half obscured by her shoulder, looking off to the side at the horizon. It had always been the dynamic. Brielle was the star. I was the background. Brielle was the voice. I was the echo. She needed that hierarchy to feel safe. She needed to believe that she was the protector and I was the project. If that structure collapsed, I did not know who she would be, but I knew who I was. Marin, I said, standing up and smoothing the front of my cashmere sweater. Send the final agenda to the board and make sure there is a seat for me at the head of the table. I do not want to walk in from the back. I want to be sitting there when the doors open. Understood, Marin said. Anything else? Yes. Have legal prep a standard non-disclosure agreement breach warning. Just in case. I walked to the window. The rain had stopped, and the city was steel gray and serious. Below me, thousands of people were enjoying their Sunday, dreading the start of the work week. They were dreading the alarm clock, the commute, the grind. Graham Sutter was down there somewhere, likely pacing his living room, rehearsing his lies, terrified of the mysterious chairwoman who held his fate in her hands. He was afraid of a monster he had invented in his head. He had no idea the real monster was the sister-in-law he had dismissed as a failure. He thought he was preparing for a presentation. He was actually walking into an execution of his own making. I looked at the reflection of my own eyes in the glass. They looked tired, but they looked sharp. They think Monday is Graham's day. For me, Monday is the day of truth. The boardroom on the top floor of the Vanta North Tower was designed to intimidate. It was a vast expanse of polished concrete and floor-to-ceiling glass that offered a 360-degree view of the city below. The table itself was a 20-foot slab of reclaimed timber, heavy and imposing, surrounded by ergonomic leather chairs that cost more than most people's first cars. The air smelled of ozone and filtered oxygen. I walked in at 8:55. The room was already half full. The board members, a collection of industry veterans and venture capital heavyweights, were settling into their seats, murmuring quietly over their tablets. They looked up as I entered. The conversation stopped. Good morning, Madam Chair. Robert, the representative from our largest investor group, said, standing up to shake my hand. Good morning, Robert, I replied, setting my laptop down at the head of the table. I trust the briefing packet was sufficient? Detailed as always. He nodded. I took my seat. It was the only chair with a high back. It was the position of ultimate authority in this building, and for the last 3 years, I had occupied it mostly in absentia, dialing in via voice or sending directives through my CEO. But today, I was flesh and blood. The clock on the wall ticked to 9 o'clock. The heavy glass doors slid open, and the operational leadership team filed in. They looked like a school of nervous fish entering a shark tank. They were straightening their ties, checking their phones, avoiding eye contact with the board members. Graham was not with them. I checked my watch. 9:02. "We will begin," I said, my voice cutting through the rustling of papers. "We have a tight agenda." Just as I reached for the tablet to activate the main screen. The doors hissed open again. Graham Sutter hurried in. He was flushed, a sheen of sweat on his forehead, clutching his laptop like a shield. He looked exactly as he had at dinner, confident in his own importance, but frantic about the logistics. "Apologies, everyone," Graham announced, his voice booming slightly too loud for the acoustic dynamics of the room. "Elevator issue on the 35th floor. You know how the morning rush is." He did not look at the head of the table yet. He was too busy nodding at Marcus, my CEO, trying to establish a rapport. He pulled out the chair at the far end of the table, directly opposite me. "No problem, Graham," Marcus said, his face unreadable. "Take a seat. The chair is just starting," Graham chuckled, a nervous, ingratiating sound. "Right, the chair. Wouldn't want to keep the mystery leader waiting." He sat down. He opened his laptop. He arranged his notes. And then, finally, he looked up to see who he was apologizing to. The silence that followed was absolute. It was not just quiet. It was a vacuum. I watched the recognition hit him in waves. First, there was confusion. He saw a woman who looked like Zoe. His brain likely rejected it immediately. Zoe was unemployed. Zoe was a failure. Zoe was at home, probably sleeping in. Then, he saw the clothes, the sharp, black blazer, the way the board members were looking at me with deference. Then, he saw my eyes. The color drained from his face so fast, it looked like a medical emergency. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He blinked. Once, twice, as if trying to clear a hallucination. His hands, which had been resting on the table, spasmed uncontrollably, and he gripped the edge of the mahogany as if the floor had suddenly tilted 45 degrees. "Zoe," he whispered. It was barely audible, a breath of pure disbelief. I did not blink. I did not smile. I did not acknowledge the name. "Mr. Sutter," I said, my voice cool and detached. "You are late. Please settle in so we can proceed." The sound of my voice, the same voice he had interrupted at dinner, the same voice he had ignored for 2 years, seeming to hit him like a physical blow. He slumped back in his chair. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the other board members. He was waiting for someone to laugh. He was waiting for someone to tell him this was a prank, that his fiancé's loser sister had snuck into the boardroom. No one laughed. Robert turned to him with a frown. "Is there a problem, Mr. Sutter?" Graham shook his head rapidly, a jerky, mechanical motion. No. "Excellent," I said. "Let us move to item 1, the strategic acquisition of Lyra Tech." For the next 20 minutes, I ran the meeting with surgical precision. I dissected the financial reports. I grilled the CFO on the debt structuring. I approved the hiring freeze for the marketing department. Throughout it all, Graham sat there like a statue made of ice. He did not move. He barely breathed. He just stared at me, his eyes wide and terrified, trying to reconcile the two halves of his reality that had just collided with catastrophic force. "Moving on," I said, tapping the screen. "Item 3, product roadmap and performance review. Mr. Sutter, I believe this is your floor." Graham flinched. He looked at his laptop screen, then back at me. He looked like a man being asked to defuse a bomb with a hammer. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. Yes, of course." He stood up. His legs were shaking. He fumbled with the connector cable for 10 seconds before getting his slide deck on the main screen. He began to speak. It was a disaster. The confident, jargon-filled speech he had rehearsed at dinner was gone. He stammered. He lost his place. He read directly from the slides. A rookie mistake. Every time he looked at me, he stuttered. I let him struggle. I waited. He reached slide 7, the graph, the beautiful, perfect, falsified curve of growth. As you can see, Graham said, his voice trembling, our retention rates have been strong. We are seeing a steady 12% climb month over month. The user base is very happy. He tried to click to the next slide quickly, to bury the lie. Pause there, please, I said. Graham froze. His hand hovered over the clicker. Go back 1 slide, I commanded. He did. The graph loomed large on the 80-inch screen behind him. I clasped my hands in front of me and leaned forward slightly. Mr. Sutter, that graph indicates a consistent growth trajectory through the 4th quarter. Specifically, it shows a steady upward trend through November. Yes, Graham said, sweat now visible on his upper lip. Yes, it was a strong month. That is fascinating, I said, my tone conversational but deadly. Because on November 9th, Vanta North Systems experienced a catastrophic server failure in the region your product serves. We had 48 hours of downtime. Support tickets spiked by 300%. We lost approximately 8% of our active users in that single week. The room went dead silent. The board members turned their heads from the screen to Graham. Graham licked his lips. I was not aware of the specific numbers regarding the outage. You are the senior product lead, I said. How could you not be aware that your product was offline for 2 days? He scrambled. I meant that after the recovery, the numbers bounced back. We smoothed the data to show the overall trend. Smooth the data, I repeated the phrase slowly. Mr. Sutter, smoothing data implies removing minor variances. What you have done here is erase a significant operational failure to present a false narrative of stability to this board. It was not a false narrative, Graham argued, his voice rising in panic. It was just a presentation choice. We wanted to focus on the long-term vision, not the hiccups. A hiccup is a coffee spill, I said. Losing 8% of the user base is a hemorrhage. By hiding it, you are preventing this board from allocating the necessary resources to fix the infrastructure stability issues. You are prioritizing your personal appearance of success over the structural integrity of this company. Graham looked around the room for help. He looked at Marcus. Marcus was staring at his notepad, refusing to make eye contact. He looked at his colleague, Jason, who was staring at the ceiling. I did what I was told, Graham blurted out. It was a desperation move. A reflex. Told by whom? I asked. Are you stating that your direct supervisor instructed you to falsify these reports? Graham opened his mouth, then closed it. He realized the trap. If he blamed his boss, he was a whistleblower with no proof. If he took the blame, he was incompetent. No, it was my decision. I thought it was the best way to represent the potential of the product. Potential is hypothetical, I said. This board operates on reality, and the reality is that this slide is a fabrication. I turned to the board secretary. Please note that the product roadmap presentation is suspended pending a full data audit. I want a third-party review of all metrics reported by Mr. Sutter's division for the last 4 quarters. We will not make any capital allocation decisions until I see the raw server logs compared against these reports. Understood. Madam Chair, the secretary said. I looked back at Graham. He was still standing, but he looked like he had been hollowed out. The arrogance was gone. The tech giant persona was gone. He was just a man in a suit that was suddenly too big for him, realizing that the unemployment he had mocked me for was now staring him in the face. You may sit down, Mr. Sutter, I said, or you may excuse yourself. We have no further questions for you at this time. Graham stood there for a second longer, swaying slightly. Then, without a word, he unplugged his laptop. The screen went black. He did not look at Brielle's failure sister. He could not. He walked to the door, his footsteps heavy and slow, the sound of a dead man walking. The door hissed shut behind him. Right, I said, turning my attention back to the room as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Item 4. The Q1 budget variance. Marcus, Please proceed." The meeting continued, but the air in the room had changed. Everyone sat a little straighter. Everyone checked their figures one last time. They knew now that the chair was not a ghost. She was a hawk, and she was watching everything. The heavy oak door of the boardroom clicked shut behind me, sealing the silence inside. The corridor was empty, a long stretch of gray carpet and glass that looked like a runway. But the device in my hand was vibrating so violently it felt like it was trying to escape my grip. I walked to the nearest window, looking down at the city that was just waking up to its coffee and commute, and unlocked my phone. It was an avalanche. The screen was a blur of notifications, stacking on top of each other faster than I could read them. 17 missed calls, 42 text messages, 3 voicemails. The names flashed by in a panic-induced strobe light. Brielle, Mom, Dad, Brielle, a number I did not recognize, likely one of my aunts who had been drafted into the crisis. I opened the message thread with my sister. It was a fascinating case study in the 5 stages of grief, played out in real-time digital format. 9:15 a.m. Zoe, Graham just texted me. He says he thinks he is having a heart attack. What is going on? 9:17 a.m. Why are people saying you are the chair? Is this a joke? Pick up the phone. 9:20 a.m. You sat there last night and ate breadsticks while I told everyone you were unemployed. You let me do that. 9:22 a.m. You are sick. You did this on purpose. You wanted to humiliate me. You wanted to make me look like a liar in front of the VPs. I scrolled through the wall of blue bubbles. The narrative had already shifted. In Brielle's mind, I was not the victim of her condescension. She was the victim of my silence. She did not see her own arrogance in assuming I was a failure. She only saw my malice in not correcting her fast enough. My finger hovered over the call button, but another notification slid down. It was a voicemail from my mother. I lifted the phone to my ear, not because I wanted to hear it, but because I needed to know the blast radius. Zoe, my mother's voice was high and tight. The sound she made when she was trying to keep a lid on a pot that was boiling over. Zoe, please call us back. Brielle is hysterical. She says you are running the company? Your father and I are so confused. We told everyone you were doing, freelance computer repair or whatever it was. Why would you let us say that if it was not true? We look like we do not know our own daughter. Please, Zoe, fix this. I lowered the phone. Fix this. Even now, faced with the revelation that I had built an empire, their primary concern was not my success. It was not pride. It was the embarrassment of having been wrong. They were not asking how I did it. They were asking why I had made them look foolish by being successful without their permission. They still thought it was just something with computers, a hobby that had gotten out of hand, rather than a billion-dollar enterprise. The phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. This time from Brielle. It had come in 2 minutes ago. I pressed play. You need to issue a statement. Brielle's voice was shaking. But it was not the shake of sorrow. It was the shake of a cornered animal. Zoe, you do not understand what you have done. Jason, the guy from dinner, he texted his wife, and she knows my boss. My boss just came to my desk and asked me if it was true. He asked me if I was really the sister of the Vanta North chair. There was a pause, a ragged intake of breath. He looked at me like I was a fraud. Zoe, he asked me why I was begging for a promotion last month if my family has this kind of capital. He thinks I'm playing games. He thinks I lied about everything. You have to fix this. You have to tell them that we are estranged or something. Tell them I did not know because we do not talk. Do not let them think I am just stupid. Please. The recording ended. I stared at the device. There it was. The naked truth. Stripped of all the, I just want you to be safe rhetoric. Brielle did not care that Graham had lied to the board. She did not care that I had been insulted for years. She cared that her carefully constructed social mask had cracked. She had spent her life climbing a ladder by stepping on me. And now that the ladder was revealed to be resting on my shoulders, she was terrified of the fall. She wanted me to lie again. She wanted me to say we were estranged, to accept the role of the outcast one last time, just to preserve her reputation as the put-together one. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. I waited for the anger to flare up, for the heat of vindication to burn, but it did not come. Instead, there was just a cold, heavy ache. It was the feeling of pressing on an old bruise that had never quite healed. It was the realization that no matter how high I built this tower, they would never look up and see me. They would only see the shadow I cast over them. "Madam Chair?" I turned. Marin, my assistant, was standing 5 feet away, holding a tablet. She looked concerned, her eyes darting to the phone in my hand. "Are you all right? The strategy team is waiting in conference room B. The consultants from Stratford and Company are dialed in from New York." I looked at Marin. She knew who I was. She respected the work, the hours, the sacrifices. She did not need me to be small to make herself feel big. "I am fine. Marin," I said. My voice was steady, surprising even me. "The Stratford meeting, that is for the Series D restructuring, correct?" "Yes, ma'am. They have the risk assessment models ready for the Lyra Tech acquisition." "Good." I looked down at my phone one last time. A new text from my father had just popped up. "Zoe, answer your sister. She is hyperventilating." I did not open it. I did not reply. I did not defend myself. I slid my thumb up the side of the phone and held down the power button. The screen went gray, then black. The vibrations stopped. The avalanche was halted. Not because the snow stopped falling, but because I stepped out of its path. They wanted a reaction. They wanted the drama. They wanted me to engage in the messy, loud family dynamic where they held all the cards. But I was not playing cards anymore. I was playing chess, and I had a company to run. "Marin," I said, slipping the dead phone into my pocket. "Let us go. I want to hear what Stratford has to say about the European market expansion, and get me a fresh coffee. Black." "Right away," she said. I walked past her, down the long gray hallway, my heels clicking a rhythm of absolute certainty against the floor. I left the chaos of the Jenkins family in the dark. Trapped in a powered-down device, I had a job to do. And for the first time in my life, I was choosing the family I built over the family I was born into. It was 3 in the afternoon when Marin opened the door to my office and nodded once. She did not need to speak. The look on her face said everything. It was the look of someone who had just escorted a prisoner to the gallows. "Send him in," I said, not looking up from the acquisition files on my desk. Graham walked in. The strut was gone, the confident set of his shoulders. The way he had taken up space at the restaurant the night before had evaporated. He looked smaller, his suit jacket seeming to hang off him as if he had lost 10 pounds in the last 6 hours. He stood by the door, refusing to cross the threshold onto the plush carpet until I acknowledged him. "Sit down, Graham," I said, closing the file folder with a deliberate snap. He moved to the chair opposite my desk, the same guest chair where senators and billionaires had sat to negotiate deals. He sat on the edge of it, his hands clasped tight between his knees to stop them from trembling. "Madam Chair," he started, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Madam Chair, I want to formally apologize for the disruption this morning, and for the misunderstanding regarding your identity." I leaned back. Observing him, he was trying to salvage his career with formality. He thought if he used the right titles, I would forget that he had treated me like a charity case over appetizers. "Let us be clear about 2 things. Graham," I said, my voice even. "First, you are not here because you were rude to me at dinner. My ego is not fragile enough to fire a senior lead just because he has bad manners. Second, my relationship with your fiancé is irrelevant to your employment at Vanta North Systems. Do you understand?" He blinked, looking like he had expected me to scream at him. Yes, I understand." "Good. Then let us talk about why you are actually here. You lied to the board." Graham winced. "I did not lie. You presented a growth curve that does not exist." I cut him off. "In my world, that is a lie, and I want to know why. You are smart enough to know that server logs are auditable. You had to know you would get caught eventually. So why do it? Graham looked down at his hands. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the hum of the air filtration system. It was the dinner, he said quietly. Excuse me? He looked up, and for the first time, there was no mask, just a tired, scared man. Not just the dinner, it is everything. Brielle, the wedding, the expectations. Last night, at the Juniper Room, I was performing. I had to be the guy who works at the tech giant. I had to be the big shot who deals with real problems. Brielle feeds off that. She needs me to be the hero so she can be the hero's wife. So you falsified corporate data to impress my sister? I asked, skeptical. No, Graham shook his head rapidly. I mean, yes, the attitude was for her. But the data, that was pressure, real pressure. It is not just me. Zoe, Madam Chair, my division head, Marcus, not the CEO. The other Marcus. He made it clear that we do not send red slides upstairs. He told me to fix the optics before the presentation. He said if I showed the drop from the outage, the board would cut our budget. I narrowed my eyes. This was the thread I had been looking for. You are telling me there is a culture in the product division that encourages sanitizing data? It is an unspoken rule, Graham admitted, his shoulders slumping. Make it look green, or get replaced by someone who will. I thought if I just got through this meeting, I could fix the retention numbers next quarter before anyone noticed. I was buying time. You were buying time with my credibility, I said cold. And you were doing it while mocking the very person who could have helped you, Graham flinched. I did not know, I swear. You did not know because you never asked, I said, leaning forward. Tell me something. Graham, in the 2 years you have been dating Brielle, did you ever once ask her specifically what I did? Did you ever look me up on LinkedIn? Did you ever ask for my last name and run a Google search? He opened his mouth to defend himself, then stopped. The realization hit him. No, he whispered. Why? Because he struggled with the truth, but I waited him out. Because Brielle told me who you were. She said you were struggling. She said you were finding yourself. It fit. It made sense. I liked being the successful one. It felt good to sit at that table and feel like I had made it. Compared to what I thought you were. You liked the hierarchy, I said. You and Brielle both. You needed someone beneath you to feel tall. He nodded, shame coloring his cheeks red. Yes, that is a dangerous way to build a life, Graham. And it is a fatal way to build a career. Because while you were busy looking down at me, you forgot to look at the data you were presenting. I picked up a pen and tapped it against the desk. I had a choice to make. I could fire him right now. It would be easy, justified. But if what he said about the pressure from middle management was true, firing him would just cut off one head of the hydra. The rot was deeper. I am going to offer you a choice, I said. Graham's head snapped up. A choice? Option A, I said, holding up one finger. I fire you for cause, fraudulent reporting. You lose your severance, your stock options. And I will personally ensure that every reference check you get for the next 10 years mentions this meeting. Graham paled. And option B? Option B, I continued. You go back to your desk right now. You write an email to the entire board, copying me and the CEO. In that email, you will state that upon further review, you discovered a calculation error in your presentation. You will attach the correct raw data showing the 8% drop. You will take full responsibility for the oversight. That is professional suicide, Graham whispered. No, that is a flesh wound. It hurts, but you survive, because after you send that email, you are going to work with my internal audit team. You are going to show them every email, every memo, and every Slack message where your division head pressured you to fix the optics. You are going to help me clean house. Graham looked terrified. If I send that correction, I will look incompetent. Better incompetent than dishonest, I countered. Competence can be taught. Integrity cannot. He hesitated. I could see the wheels turning in his head. It wasn't just the job he was worried about. "Brielle is going to kill me," he said, his voice hollow. "She has been texting me all morning. She told her boss I was getting a promotion today. If I send an email saying I messed up, if I get demoted, she is going to look like a fool. She cares about that more than anything." "I know," I said softly. And I did know. I knew exactly how Brielle operated. She would rather have a husband who lied and succeeded than a husband who told the truth and struggled. "She told me to hold the line," Graham confessed, looking at his phone, which was face down on the chair arm. "She said, whatever happens, do not admit fault. She said we can spin it." "You cannot spin math, Graham," I said. "And you cannot spin me." I stood up and walked to the window, turning my back to him. "This is the reality check, Graham. You have spent 2 years dating a version of my sister that exists only on Instagram and at dinner parties. You have bought into a narrative where you are the golden couple and I am the cautionary tale. Today, the lights came on. You have to decide if you want to be the man Brielle wants you to be, a liar with a fancy title, or the man who actually works for this company." I turned back to face him. "If you build your life on an image, Graham, it collapses the moment you need it to hold your weight. Brielle's world is made of glass. My world is made of steel. Which one do you want to live in?" Graham stared at me. He looked at the door. He looked at his future. Slowly, he stood up. He did not look like the man who walked in. He looked shaken, but he looked awake. "I will write the email," he said. "Good. You have 1 hour. If I do not see it in my inbox by 4 o'clock, option A goes into effect. Zoe." "Madam Chair," he paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Does Brielle know about all of this? The scope of it?" "She knows I am the chair," I said. "But I do not think she understands what that means. She thinks it is a title. She does not understand it is a responsibility." "I do not think she knows who you are at all," Graham said, almost to himself. "I do not think she knows who I am, either." "Then perhaps it is time you introduced yourselves," I said. He nodded once, a sharp, painful movement, and walked out. I watched the door close. I did not feel triumphant. I felt a heavy exhaustion settling into my bones. I had just saved a man's career and possibly destroyed his engagement, all in the span of 20 minutes. I walked back to my desk and sat down. My phone was still off. I left it that way. I had 1 hour to wait for an email that would start a war in my own company, and a war in my family. I pulled the next file toward me. At least the numbers on the page never pretended to be something they were not. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long orange shadows across the floor of my office. The email from Graham had arrived 10 minutes ago. It was humble, accurate, and terrifyingly honest. He had done it. He had chosen the hard road. Now, it was my turn. I sat in the high-backed leather chair, the silence of the room pressing in on me. I picked up my phone and turned it back on. The screen lit up, instantly flooding with the backlog of notifications. But I ignored the text messages. I went straight to contacts and pressed the button labeled Mom, Dad, Home. The ringback tone sounded twice before the line clicked open. "Zoe?" It was my mother. Her voice was not the warm, welcoming tone she used when I called on birthdays. It was high-pitched, breathless, a mix of panic and accusation. "I am here, Mom," I said. "Where have you been?" she demanded. I could hear movement in the background, the sound of pacing on hardwood floors. "We have been calling you for hours. Brielle is... Zoe, Brielle is a wreck. She called us screaming. She says you are trying to get Graham fired. She says you humiliated her in front of her fiancé's bosses. What is going on?" "I am not trying to get anyone fired," I said calmly. "I am doing my job." "Your job?" My father's voice cut in. He must have been listening on the extension in the den. "Since when is your job running the company Graham works for? Why are we hearing this from Brielle? Zoe? Do you have any idea how foolish we felt?" She called us asking if it was a prank, and we had to tell her we had no idea what she was talking about. Why are you hearing it from Brielle? I repeated his question, letting the weight of it hang in the air. That is a great question. Dad, why are you hearing it from her? Why didn't you know? Because you never talk to us, my mother cried. You are always so secretive. You live in that apartment downtown that we have never seen. You come to dinner and barely say a word. I tried to tell you, I interrupted, my voice steady but rising in volume. 3 years ago, Christmas Eve, I handed you a magazine, Forbes. My face was on the cover of the technology section. I told you, look, Dad, they did a feature on the company. Do you remember what you did? There was silence on the line. You used it as a coaster for your beer, I said. And you asked me if I could help you reset your email password because you forgot it again. You did not even open the page. We thought it was a paid thing, my father grumbled, his defensive tone wavering slightly. You know how people pay to be in those newsletters. We didn't think it was real. Zoe, you were always tinkering with things. How were we supposed to know it was this? You were supposed to know because you are my parents, I said. You were supposed to ask. We just wanted you to be stable. My mother interjected, the tears starting to leak into her voice. That is all we ever wanted, Brielle. Brielle followed the path. She went to school. She got the marketing job. She found a nice man. It made sense. We understood it. We just worried about you. Zoe, we thought you were drifting. Stable, I said, feeling the bitterness rise in my throat. You keep using that word, but you did not want me to be stable for my sake. You wanted me to be stable for yours. It is easier, isn't it? To have one daughter who is the success story and one who is the fixer-upper. It balances the equation. If I am doing okay, then Brielle is doing great. But if I am doing this, if I am the chairwoman of a billion-dollar company, then what is Brielle? Don't you talk about your sister like that, my father snapped. She has worked hard. I know she has, I said. But so have I. The difference is, you never celebrated my work because it didn't fit the story you wanted to tell your friends at the country club. It is hard to explain algorithms to your golf buddies. It is easy to explain a marketing manager. You chose the easy story. That is not fair, my mother sobbed. Is it? I asked. Be honest. Mom, just for once, just for 1 minute on this phone call, admit that it was comforting to think I needed your help. Admit that you liked checking in on poor Zoe because it made you feel needed, and it made Brielle feel superior. The silence that followed was long and painful. It stretched out, filled only by the static of the connection. It was simpler, my father admitted finally. His voice was lower, stripped of the anger. We are old, Zoe, this world, this tech stuff. We don't get it. Brielle's life looks like the life we had. Your life looks like science fiction. It was easier to assume you were just getting by. It meant we didn't have to feel stupid for not understanding what our own daughter did for a living. And it meant you didn't have to challenge Brielle, I added. She is sensitive, Zoe, my mother pleaded. You know how she is. She needs validation. Why couldn't you have just warned her? Why did you have to blindside her like that? You could have pulled her aside before the dinner. You could have told her, hey, actually, I am the boss. Why let her make a fool of herself? I didn't let her do anything, I said. She came to dinner with a script. She handed me my lines. She told me to be the unemployed loser. She told me to blend in, if I had told her the truth right then. Do you think she would have believed me? Or would she have accused me of trying to steal her thunder, of trying to make everything about me? She would have thought you were lying, my father said heavily. Exactly, I said. She built a cage for me, and she insisted I get inside it. All I did was refuse to lock the door. I sat there and I listened. I didn't humiliate her. Mom, her own arrogance did that. She was so busy looking down on me that she didn't notice she was standing on a trap door. She is devastated, my mother said. She says Graham might lose his job. She says her boss thinks she is a liar. Graham is not going to lose his job if he does what I told him to do, I said. And as for her boss, well, maybe she should stop using my name to buy social currency at her office. If she wants to be respected, she should earn it, not borrow it from a sister she pretends to pity. My mother was crying softly now. It was a heartbroken sound, the sound of a worldview shattering. I feel like I don't know you, she whispered. My own daughter. I don't know you. I am the same person I have always been. Mom, I said, my own voice softening. I am the girl who stayed up all night reading in the hallway so I wouldn't disturb you. I am the girl who fixed the VCR when it broke. I am the girl who stood in the back of photos so Brielle could be in the front. I haven't changed. You just never turned around to look at me. Tell me, my mother said. She sniffled, blowing her nose. Please, just tell me. What do you do? Actually, not the computer thing, the real thing. I closed my eyes. It was the question I had waited 10 years to hear. I wished it hadn't taken a family crisis to prompt it, but I took it anyway. I build infrastructure, I said simply. You know how when you buy something online, and the bank approves it in a second? Or when a hospital pulls up a patient's records from another city instantly? I built the systems that make that happen. I manage a team of 1,200 people. We solve problems that keep the economy moving. I make decisions that affect industries. It is hard work. Mom, it is lonely work sometimes, but I am really, really good at it. I heard my father let out a breath. 1,200 people? Yes, Dad. And you? You are in charge of all of them? I am in charge of the people who are in charge of them, I corrected gently. Jesus, he whispered. There was no mockery in it this time, just fear and a strange, reluctant awe. I am sorry we didn't ask, my mother said. Her voice was weak. We were wrong, Zoe. We were very wrong. I know, I said. Thank you for saying it. What happens now? She asked. With Brielle? With Christmas? I don't know, I admitted. That is up to her. I am done playing the role she wrote for me. If she wants to have a relationship with me, she has to meet me, the real me, not the little sister she can pat on the head. She won't take that well, my father noted. No, I agreed. She won't, but I'm not responsible for her feelings anymore. I have a company to run. Okay, my mother said. Okay, go. Go run your company. Zoe, we will call you later. We need to process this. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad. I ended the call. I placed the phone face down on the desk. The silence rushed back in, but it felt different now. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of secrets. It was the clean, sharp silence of the truth. I felt a phantom pain in my chest, a dull ache where the rejection had lived for so long. It hurt to hear them admit that they had preferred me small. It hurt to know that my success was a burden to their family narrative, but it was a clean hurt. It was the pain of a bone being reset so it could finally heal straight. I looked at the clock. It was 4:15. Graham's email was in my inbox. My parents knew the truth. The world was realigning itself around facts instead of fictions. I stood up and walked to the door. I had one more meeting, and for the first time, I wasn't walking into it as someone's daughter or someone's sister. I was just Zoe, and that was enough. Brielle chose the venue for our ceasefire, a coffee shop in Pioneer Square that was quiet enough for a conversation, but public enough that she clearly thought I would not make a scene. She arrived wearing sunglasses despite the overcast Seattle sky, clutching a designer handbag like it contained the nuclear launch codes. I sat down opposite her. I had 30 minutes before a conference call with legal regarding the Lyra Tech acquisition, and I intended to stick to that timeline strictly. You look tired, I said. It was not an insult. It was an observation. Her makeup was flawless, but there was a tightness around her mouth that concealer could not hide. I have not slept in 48 hours. Zoe, she snapped, taking off the glasses. Her eyes were bloodshot. Graham is sleeping in the guest room. My phone will not stop ringing. People at work are whispering when I walk by. This is a nightmare. It is a mess, I agreed, signaling the waiter for a black coffee. But it is a mess you made, Brielle. We do not have time for the moral high ground, she hissed, leaning over the table. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her bag and slid it across the marble top toward me. I have drafted a solution, a way we can fix the optics for both of us. I looked down at the paper. It was a printout of a draft social media post, written in my voice. So proud of my sister Brielle Jenkins for keeping my secret all these years. We decided to play a little prank on the industry to see who was paying attention. Vanta North Systems has always valued privacy, and my family has been my fortress. Looking forward to collaborating with Brielle's firm in the near future. I read it twice. The second time, I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You want me to post this? I asked, looking up at her. You want me to tell the world that my strategic silence was actually a prank? A joke? It saves face. Zoe, she pleaded, her voice dropping to a frantic whisper. It makes it look like we are a team, like we planned this together. If you post this, everyone laughs. Graham looks like he was in on it too. It fixes the lie about his data because we can say it was part of the test. It solves everything. It solves nothing, I said, sliding the paper back to her. It is just another lie to cover the first lie. I am the chairwoman of a publicly traded company, Brielle. I do not play pranks, and I certainly do not perjure myself on LinkedIn to help you save social standing. You are so selfish, she spat, crumbling the paper in her fist. You have everything. You have the money, the power, the building with your name on the internal servers. Why can't you just give me this one thing? Why do you have to be so rigid? Because credibility is the only currency that matters in my world, I said. And apparently, you have spent yours. Brielle looked away, biting her lip. She looked terrified. It was not just social embarrassment. There was something else. What is really going on? Brielle, I asked. Why are you this desperate? Graham still has his job. Assuming he follows the protocol I gave him, why are you panicking? She took a shaky breath. My boss, Mr. Henderson. What about him? I might have implied things, she admitted, refusing to meet my eyes. 6 months ago, when I was up for the senior coordinator role, I told him I had a direct line to Vanta North executive leadership. I told him I was working on a partnership deal. I said I could get him a meeting with the chair. I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. You used a connection you did not think existed to get a promotion? I thought you were a nobody, she cried out. I thought I was safe. I thought I could just keep making excuses for why the meeting was delayed. I thought the chair was some old guy in Silicon Valley who would never show up. But now everyone knows you are my sister. And Henderson called me into his office this morning. He wants the meeting. Zoe. He wants me to deliver the partnership I promised. If I tell him I lied, if I tell him I have no influence over you, I am fired for cause. It was a house of cards built inside a wind tunnel. She had leveraged my anonymity to build her career, and now my visibility was destroying it. I cannot help you with that, I said. Vanta North does not partner with boutique marketing firms. We handle everything in-house, and even if we did, I would not hire a firm that secured the meeting through fraud. So you are just going to let me get fired? She asked, her voice trembling with self-pity. Your own sister? I am going to let you face the consequences of your actions, I corrected. Just like I am making Graham face his... Brielle slammed her hand on the table, rattling the silverware. Graham, that is another thing. You are humiliating him, Zoe. Making him send that email? Making him undergo an internal audit? You are stripping him of his dignity. He came home yesterday and he looked like a ghost. He barely spoke to me. He kept his job, I said. He owned his mistake. That is dignity. Brielle, pretending to be perfect is not dignity. It is vanity. "He is my fiancé!" she shouted, not caring who heard. "You are supposed to protect him. You are supposed to help family. If you really cared about me, you would have just fired the manager who pressured him and let Graham off the hook. But no, you had to make it a lesson. You had to prove you are the boss." "I am the boss," I said, my voice cold. "And Graham is an employee, if he wants to stay employed. He needs to be honest. It has nothing to do with you." "It has everything to do with me," she countered. "You are doing this to punish me. You are doing this because you are jealous." I blinked. "Jealous? Of what?" "Of the fact that I am normal," she said, her eyes wild. "That I have a life, that people like me. You have always been the weird one, Zoe, the quiet one, the one in the corner, and now you have all this power, and you are using it to tear down my life because you cannot stand that I was happy." I looked at her. I looked at the fear behind the rage. She was projecting so hard she was practically vibrating. "I am not jealous, Brielle," I said softly. "I am just tired. I am tired of being the prop in your play." She pulled out her phone. Her thumbs flew across the screen. "I am texting Sarah. I am going to tell her everything. I am going to tell everyone what a vindictive monster you are. You think you can control the narrative? I have friends, Zoe, real friends, not just employees." I took a sip of my coffee. "Go ahead." My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced down. A text message had just come in. From Brielle. I looked at Brielle. She was still typing furiously, unaware that she had just hit the wrong contact name in her blind rage. I opened the message. "OMG, Sarah. She is sitting right here being such a bitch. I literally cannot deal with her. I should have never let her come to that dinner. I knew I had to keep her down. I told you. The only way Graham feels like a man is if he thinks he is the breadwinner. I had to make Zoe look like a loser so he would feel secure enough to marry me. And now she is ruining it all." I read the text 3 times. I had to make Zoe look like a loser so he would feel secure enough to marry me. It was the smoking gun. It wasn't just an assumption I had made. It wasn't just a vibe. It was a strategy. She had actively, consciously sabotaged my image to stroke her fiancé's ego. I took a screenshot. Then I looked up at Brielle. She had stopped typing. She was staring at her phone screen, her face draining of color. She must have realized what she had done. "Zoe," she whispered. "Did you?" "I got it," I said, holding up my phone. "You sent it to me." "Delete it," she demanded, reaching across the table. "Delete it right now. It was a typo. I didn't mean it." "You meant every word," I said, pulling my phone out of her reach. "You just didn't mean for me to see it." It was just venting," she stammered. "I was just angry. It is not true." "It is true," I said. "And the saddest part is that you think so little of Graham. You think he is so fragile that he can only love you if he is superior to your sister. You think his masculinity is that cheap." Brielle sank back into her chair. She put her face in her hands. "He is leaving me, Zoe." The fight went out of her instantly. The rage collapsed into pure, unadulterated fear. "He told me last night," she sobbed through her fingers. "He said he looked at me at dinner and he didn't recognize me. He said I treated you like a dog. He said he realized that I don't see people. I only see status. He asked me if I would still love him if he got fired and had to work at a coffee shop, and I hesitated. Zoe, and he saw it. I watched her cry. It was not a performance this time. It was the raw, ugly crying of a woman watching her future dissolve. "He is right," I said. "You don't see people. You see rungs on a ladder." "I just wanted us to be successful," she wailed. "Is that a crime? I wanted us to be the power couple. I did it for us." "You did it for the audience," I said. "There is a difference." I stood up. I checked my watch. I had 10 minutes to get back to the office. "Please," Brielle looked up, her mascara running down her cheeks. "Please help me. Talk to him. Tell him I am a good person. Tell him it was just a sister thing. He respects you now. If you tell him to stay, he will stay. I cannot fix your relationship, Brielle, I said. And I won't lie to him again. He deserves the truth, just like I did. She stared at me, her eyes pleading. Then, she asked the question that made my blood run cold. Can't you just... She choked on a sob. Can't you just stop being the chair? Can't you sell the company? Can't you just go back to being normal? If you were just Zoe again, if you were just the little sister, maybe he wouldn't be so intimidated. Maybe things could go back to the way they were. Can't you just be small again? For me? I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for a time machine. She was asking me to dismantle my life's work, to unmake myself, just so she could feel comfortable in her own skin. No, I said. I can't. Why not? She whispered. Because I didn't build this company to spite you. Brielle, I said, picking up my purse. I built it because I'm good at it, and I'm not going to apologize for my competence ever again. I turned and walked out of the coffee shop. I stepped out onto the wet sidewalk, taking a deep breath of the cold Seattle air. It tasted like rain and exhaust and freedom. I had the screenshot. I had the truth. And for the first time, I realized that I didn't need my sister's permission to exist. I didn't need her approval. I didn't even need her love. Not if it came with conditions like that. I hailed a cab. Vanta North Tower, I told the driver, and step on it. I have a meeting. Wednesday morning arrived with the weight of a judge's gavel. The boardroom was fuller than it had been on Monday. This was the strategy session, the day we decided the fate of Lyra Tech. The room smelled of stale coffee and aggressive cologne. We were at a crossroads. We could acquire Lyra Tech for $300 million, absorb their debt, and save 200 jobs. Or we could wait 6 months for them to collapse, buy their intellectual property at a bankruptcy auction for pennies on the dollar, and let those 200 engineers file for unemployment. The financial logic is irrefutable, the representative from the hedge fund argued, tapping his pen on the table. We wait. We starve them out. We pick the carcass clean in the third quarter. It maximizes shareholder value. It destroys the ecosystem, I countered, my voice low but carrying to every corner of the room. If we burn Lyra, we signal to every innovator in Seattle that Vanta North is a predator, not a partner. We lose trust, and trust is expensive to buy back. The door opened. Graham Sutter walked in. He did not walk in with the swagger he had worn at the Juniper Room. He walked in with the grim determination of a man marching to a firing squad. He was carrying a single file folder. Mr. Sutter, I said, you requested a slot to amend your previous report. Yes, Madam Chair, Graham said. He stood at the end of the table. He did not look at the view. He did not look at his division head, Marcus, who was glaring at him from the side of the room. Graham looked directly at me. I am submitting a formal correction to the Q4 product roadmap, Graham announced. His voice shook slightly, but his words were clear. The data I presented on Monday was manipulated. The actual retention rate for November showed an 8% drop due to the server outage. The growth curve was artificially smoothed to hide operational instability. A gasp went around the room. The hedge fund manager looked furious. You lied to the board? Do you have any idea? I am not finished, Graham interrupted. He took a breath. I falsified the report because I was instructed to do so. I was told that if I showed the red metrics, my budget would be cut. I was told to fix the optics. That is a lie. Marcus, the division head, shot out of his chair. He is trying to cover his own incompetence. I never gave that order. Graham silently slid the file folder down the long table. It stopped in front of me. I opened it. Inside were printed emails, Slack messages, timestamps. Make it look green. Graham, I do not care how. If the board sees a drop, it is your head. Fix the optics. I looked up at Marcus. His face was purple. The audit team has already verified the digital signatures on these messages, I said calmly. It seems, Marcus, that you have created a culture where truth is a liability That ends today. I turn to the CEO. Accept Mr. Sutter's corrected report. Initiate a termination protocol for the division head, effective immediately, and open a full internal investigation into the reporting standards of the product department. And Mr. Sutter? The CEO asked. He still falsified the documents. I looked at Graham. He was bracing himself for the impact. Mr. Sutter is placed on a 6-month probation. I ruled. He will oversee the data cleanup. He came forward when he could have stayed hidden. I do not punish integrity, even when it is late. Keep your seat. Graham. Graham let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He nodded once, grateful and humbled. Just then, the glass doors of the boardroom rattled. Marin, my assistant, slipped inside, looking flustered. She hurried over to me and whispered in my ear, "It is your sister. She is in the lobby. Security tried to stop her, but she is screaming. She says she has a right to see the chair. She is causing a scene. Zoe, people are filming." I closed the file folder. "Gentlemen," I said, standing up, "we will recess for 15 minutes. When we return, we will vote on the Lyra Tech acquisition. And for the record, I will be voting to buy them now and save the jobs. We build things here. We do not destroy them just to save a few dollars." I walked out of the boardroom, leaving the stunned silence behind me. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The lobby of Vanta North Systems was a cathedral of glass and white marble. In the center of it, Brielle Jenkins was pacing like a caged tiger. She was wearing a coat that looked too expensive for the weather, her hair perfectly sprayed, but her eyes were wild. 2 security guards were standing 10 feet away, unsure of how to handle a woman who claimed to be the owner's sister. She saw me step out of the elevator. "Zoe!" she screamed, rushing toward me. Her heels clicked frantically on the marble. "Thank God! Tell them! Tell these idiots who I am!" "They know who you are. Brielle," I said, stopping her with a raised hand. "You are the woman shouting in my lobby." "I need to talk to you," she panted. Grabbing my arm, I pulled away gently. Henderson called me again. He gave me until noon. "Noon, Zoe. If I do not get a confirmation letter from you saying we are partners, I am out. You have to sign something. Just a piece of paper. Anything." "I cannot do that," I said. "Why not?" she cried, her voice echoing off the high walls. "Because of ethics? Because of rules? We are family. I am your big sister. I defended you when kids made fun of your glasses. I let you tag along to the mall. Does that mean nothing?" "It means something," I said. "But it does not mean I commit fraud for you." "I am not asking for fraud," she pleaded. She switched tactics, her eyes filling with tears. "I am asking for mercy. If I lose this job, I lose my status, I lose my circle, I will be nobody. Like you were, like I was," I repeated. "Is that what you think I was? A nobody?" "You know what I mean," she snapped, the anger bleeding through the tears. "You were the quiet one, the one in the background. I was the one who had to shine for both of us. I carried the pressure. Zoe, I had to be perfect because you were so strange. And now you are punishing me for it because you finally got some power and you want to see me crawl." "I do not want to see you crawl," I said. "I want to see you stand on your own 2 feet for the first time in your life." "You are jealous," she hissed, leaning in close. "You have always been jealous. You want to bring me down so you can finally feel superior." I looked at her. I looked at the desperation, the narcissism, the absolute refusal to see me as a human being. "Jealous," I said softly. "You really believe that? You really think I engineered this whole life just to spite you?" I pulled my phone from my pocket. "Do you remember the text you sent me yesterday?" I asked. "The one meant for Sarah?" Brielle froze. "I told you it was a typo." "No," I said. "I am going to read it to you, right here, so we are both clear on what this relationship actually is." I unlocked the screen. I did not shout. I spoke with the calm precision of a CEO reading a balance sheet. Quote, I had to make Zoe look like a loser so he would feel secure enough to marry me." End quote. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and ugly. Brielle's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked around the lobby, suddenly aware of the employees walking by, the security guards watching. She realized that she could not spin this. She could not cry her way out of it. Her motive was laid bare on the cold marble floor. "You did not protect me, Brielle," I said, putting the phone away. "You used me. You needed me to be a failure because if I was successful, you would have to ask yourself why you were not. You turned me into a prop to make your life look better. And when the prop stood up and spoke, you did not applaud. You panicked." Brielle slumped. Her posture collapsed. She looked small, smaller than I had ever seen her. The class she projected, the status she worshipped, it all dissolved. "He is going to leave me," she whispered. "Graham, he sent me a text. He said he is staying late to work on the audit. He said he needs space. He is staying late because he is fixing his mistakes," I said. "Maybe you should try doing the same." "Can't you just—" She looked up, tears streaming down her face, but this time, they were real tears of defeat. "Can't you just be my sister again? Can't we go back to before?" "We are sisters," I said. "But we are not going back. I am done shrinking. Brielle, if you want to be in my life, you have to grow up. You have to meet me at my level. I am not coming down to yours anymore." I turned around. "Zoe!" she called out, a desperate, broken sound. "What am I supposed to do?" "Figure it out," I said without looking back. "That is what adults do." I walked back to the elevator. I pressed the button for the 42nd floor. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sight of my sister standing alone in the center of the empire she had mocked. As the elevator rose, I felt a lightness I had not felt in years. The secret was out. The weight was gone. I walked back into the boardroom. The faces of the board turned to me. "Madam Chair," the CEO said, "we are ready to vote on Lyra Tech." "Good," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "I vote yes on the acquisition. We keep the staff. We integrate the technology. We play the long game." "Agreed," Robert said. "Agreed," said the CEO. I looked out the window at the skyline of Seattle. Somewhere down there, Graham was rebuilding his integrity. Somewhere down there, Brielle was facing her reality. And up here, I was finally completely myself. I did not win because I made my sister lose. I won because I stopped agreeing to play the loser. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute? At the gym? Or maybe while working on your own empire? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed Zoe's journey, please make sure to subscribe to Morgan Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people. See you in the next video.